7 years is a long time to erase someone from your life, but my sister Elena did it as if she were wiping dust off a forgotten shelf quick, cold, and without even glancing back. The last time I saw her, she stood in the doorway of our father's house, a single suitcase by her side. The evening light stretched across the floor between us, as if drawing a line she had already decided to cross. Dad sat in his old armchair, his hands weak, his breathing slow, watching her like a man silently begging time to stop. "I need to live my own life," she said. No tears, no hesitation, just that. I remember waiting for something more. A goodbye, an apology, even a lie that sounded softer than the truth. But she gave us nothing. She turned, walked out, and shut the door behind her, like we were just another chapter she didn't want to reread. At first, we believed she would come back. People leave when they're angry, we told ourselves. People run when they're confused. But they returned, don't they? Days passed, then months. Dad would sit by the window every evening, pretending to read the newspaper while his eyes drifted toward the gate. Every small sound made him look up: footsteps, a passing car, even the wind brushing against the metal fence. "Maybe she's busy," he would say quietly, more to himself than to me. I never corrected him. I didn't have the heart to replace his hope with the truth I had already accepted. She wasn't busy. She was gone. As the years unfolded, it became just the two of us, me and Dad, learning how to exist in the space she left behind. His health slowly declined, and I became everything at once: caretaker, support, and silent witness to his fading strength. I was there for the long nights when pain kept him awake. I was there for the hospital visits, the prescriptions, the quiet sighs he thought I didn't hear. And through it all, Eleanor remained nothing more than a memory. No calls, no messages, not even when Dad got worse. Not even when he asked for her in his weakest moments. When he finally passed away, the house felt unbearably quiet, like even the walls had given up waiting. I stood at his funeral alone, surrounded by people who offered condolences but could never fill the emptiness beside me. There was no sister to hold my hand, no sister to share the grief, just silence, the same silence she had left behind. That day, I buried more than my father. I buried the hope that she would ever come back. 7 years later, she came back. Not with regret, not with tears, not even with a simple "I'm sorry." She came back with a lawyer. It was a quiet afternoon when the knock echoed through the house, the same house that had grown too silent over the years. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most people had stopped visiting after Dad passed. Life had settled into a routine of stillness. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. Elena stood there. For a moment, time blurred. She looked almost the same, yet completely different. Her clothes were elegant, her posture confident, her face calm, too calm. Gone was the uncertainty I remembered. In its place stood someone distant, almost unfamiliar. Beside her was a man in a sharp suit, holding a leather folder. Reality snapped back into place. "Hi," she said, like she had only been gone for a day. My fingers tightened around the doorframe. "Hi," I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. "That's all you have to say." She didn't flinch. Instead, she gestured slightly toward the man next to her. "This is my lawyer. We need to discuss the property." Property. The word hit harder than her absence ever did. Not home, not Dad's house, property. Something inside me turned cold. "You disappear for 7 years," I said slowly, each word heavier than the last. "And the first thing you do when you come back is bring a lawyer." Her expression remained unchanged, as if this conversation had already been rehearsed in her mind. "I have legal rights," she replied. The lawyer stepped forward politely, introducing himself before opening his folder. His voice was smooth, professional, detached from the weight of what he was saying. He spoke about inheritance laws, shared ownership, and legal claims. Words that sounded clean and structured, but felt hollow in this house, filled with memories. I barely heard him. All I could focus on was her. "You weren't here," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay steady. "You didn't see him get weaker. You didn't sit with him when he couldn't sleep. You weren't there when he asked for you." For the first time, her eyes flickered, but only for a second. "That doesn't change the law," she said quietly. I let out a bitter laugh. The law. I stepped aside, letting them in, though every part of me resisted. They walked through the house like visitors, not like family. Her eyes scanned the walls, the furniture, the small details that hadn't changed, yet she felt like she didn't belong to any of it anymore. This isn't just a house, I said, closing the door behind them. It's everything we had left. She crossed her arms. And I'm part of that. No, I replied firmly. You were. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. That's when I realized something. She hadn't come back for us. She had come back to take. And for the first time in 7 years, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her win. I didn't argue that day. I didn't scream, didn't throw accusations, didn't remind her of every moment she had missed. As much as the anger burned inside me, I forced it down, because something told me this wasn't a fight I should lose control in. Instead, I looked at her calmly and said, "All right. Let's settle this properly." For the first time since she arrived, uncertainty flickered across Elena's face. It was brief, almost invisible, but I saw it. She had expected resistance, maybe even desperation. What she didn't expect was calm. What she didn't expect was that I was ready. Because the truth was, Dad had seen this coming long before either of us admitted it. A year before he passed, on a quiet evening, when the sky outside had turned a soft shade of orange, he called me into his room. His voice was weaker than usual, but his eyes were clear, sharp in a way that made me uneasy. If she ever comes back, he said slowly, it won't be for us. I didn't want to believe him. She's still your daughter, I replied. He gave a faint, tired smile. Yes, but people change when they start choosing themselves over everything else. I stayed silent. Then he reached for my hand. When that day comes, don't fight her with anger. Fight with truth. At the time, those words felt heavy, but distant, like something I wouldn't need to face for years. Now, sitting across from Alina in a lawyer's office, I understood exactly what he meant. A week after her sudden return, we met again. This time, everything was formal, cold, final. Her lawyer began, laying out her claim with confidence. My client is legally entitled to her share of the property, of course, I said, interrupting gently. Alina glanced at me, surprised by my tone. Then I placed a thick folder on the table. This is everything, I said. Her lawyer opened it, flipping through page after page, medical bills, hospital records, receipts, documents signed by doctors, written statements from neighbors who had seen me care for Dad day and night. His brows slowly furrowed. This shows you were the sole caregiver, he said. Yes, I replied quietly. Alina shifted in her seat, her confidence beginning to crack. What does that prove? She asked, though her voice lacked its earlier certainty. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my bag and took out one final envelope, sealed, untouched. I slid it across the table. Please read that, I said. The lawyer opened it carefully. As his eyes scanned the page, his entire expression changed. The room grew still. What is it? Alina demanded, her voice tightening. He looked up at her, hesitating for a moment. This is your father's will. The words landed like thunder. Her face went pale. That's not possible, she whispered. He never told me he wouldn't have, I said softly. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. According to this document, the property has been legally transferred entirely to your sibling. Silence swallowed the room. Alina stared at me, disbelief turning into something deeper, something closer to realization. But why? She asked, her voice barely audible. I held her gaze, steady and unshaken. Because I stayed. Alina didn't argue after that day. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten another case, didn't even try to negotiate. The law had spoken clearly, and for once it wasn't something she could bend to her advantage, but the real loss wasn't the house. It was something far deeper, and I could see it in her eyes as she walked out of that office. Not anger. Not even resentment, just emptiness. A few days passed before I saw her again. This time, there was no lawyer standing beside her. No polished confidence, no rehearsed words. Just Alina standing alone at the same door she had once walked out of without looking back. When I opened it, she hesitated. Can I come in? She asked softly. For a moment I said nothing. Then I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, as if every step carried the weight of memory. Her eyes moved across the room, the old armchair, the faded curtains, the small cracks in the walls that had never been repaired. Everything was the same, everything except us. I didn't think he would do that, she said after a long silence. I leaned against the wall, arms folded. Do what? Leave everything to you. Her voice wasn't bitter, just lost. I looked at her carefully. You really don't understand why, she swallowed, her gaze dropping to the floor. I thought I could come back when I was ready. That's the problem, I replied quietly. You thought this was something you could pause, like it would still be here exactly the same when you returned. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall right away. I was scared, she admitted. I wanted something different. I thought if I stayed, I'd lose myself. And what did you find? I asked. She didn't answer because we both knew. She had found a life but lost a family. The silence between us stretched, filled with everything that could never be undone. Then she looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper. Do you hate me? It was a simple question, but it carried years of absence, regret, and unspoken guilt. I thought about it, about the nights I stayed awake beside Dad, about the empty space at his funeral, about the years I spent learning how to live without her. I don't hate you, I said finally. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she didn't expect that answer. I just stopped waiting. That truth hit harder than any anger ever could. She nodded slowly, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she looked like my sister again. Not the stranger who had walked in with a lawyer, but the girl who had once shared this home with me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't respond, because some apologies come too late to change anything. After a while, she turned and walked toward the door. This time, she didn't rush. She paused for a moment, her hand resting on the handle, as if she understood what it meant to leave again. Then she stepped out, and just like that she was gone. But this time it didn't break me, because the truth was, I had already learned how to survive her absence. That was my revenge, not anger, not winning the house, but becoming someone who no longer needed her to feel whole. And as I closed the door, I realized something quietly powerful. The house was never what I inherited. Strength was.